Now to my conversation with two of America's leading experts on the military. Retired four-star Army General Barry McCaffrey and retired four-star Navy Admiral James Stavridis. Both are NBC News analysts, and both have covered Russia's war in Ukraine since the start. General, let me start with you. What have we learned over the past year?
Well, I think we've been astonished at how incompetent and corrupt and ineffective the Russian armed forces have been. Their technology didn't work. They were purported to be great at cyber warfare, at deception, at massing artillery forces. None of it came together. So we've ended up with Putin in a strategic disaster with a couple of 100,000 killed and wounded and no way out. I think the other thing we've learned is that leadership pays off, both political and military. In the Ukraine, Zelensky has become a modern-day Churchill, and a bunch of civilians have turned into infantry battalion commanders and fought the Russian army to a standstill. So it's been a strategic shock, I think, from both dimensions.
And Admiral, obviously, with your knowledge of NATO, it's also had to be a shock on the other side, how a NATO alliance that was seen by too many as a remnant of the Cold War has actually flexed its muscles and may be stronger than ever.
Indeed, and let's not forget, soon to be added to the team, Sweden and Finland, two superb turnkey militaries. They deployed under my command to Afghanistan. I know the qualities of both the Swedes and the Finns. You know, that distant sound you hear, that distant explosion is Vladimir Putin's head exploding in frustration at adding 900 miles of northern flank, Swedes and Finns. And that, Joe, is just the cherry on top of the sundae of how well this alliance is held together. And I give a lot of credit here to the president and his team, who have done an enormous amount of work making sure that we stand together against this rotten regime in Moscow.
What should, Admiral, what should the president do? What should NATO members do if Turkey tries to continue to stand in the way of Finland and Sweden becoming members?
I don't think Erdogan will push it to the absolute brink. But what we ought to be doing now is very quietly, privately, putting pressure on Turkey. And I've seen this movie before in the alliance on a number of occasions. Eventually, Turkey will acquiesce in the addition of these two nations. We are not going to drive this thing to the brink. Having said that, we do need to continue to try and pull Turkey toward the West. They're an important country, second largest army in the alliance, geographically in a critical position. It would be an epic geopolitical mistake to let Turkey drift away from NATO.
General, tell me, how important is it that Ukraine gets tanks as quickly as possible and then gets F-16s?
Well, look, from the start, Secretary Lloyd Austin, Chairman Mark Milley, the President, his national security team have been really superb at bringing together an enormous, pushing $40 billion plus package of defense technology. And they were concerned, particularly the White House, about not escalating the conflict, not ending up with NATO involved in a shooting war, not urging Putin down the direction of nuclear tactical weapon use in Ukraine. So given all that, I think they've done an incredibly good job. The 40-plus contact nations came together. NATO came together, the G7. So they get an A+. However, you know, at the end of the day, wars are won and lost at battalion level, not brilliant generals, but fighting troops on the front line. And Ukraine's in a perilous situation. This is a brutal war. Allegedly, they may have suffered 100,000 casualties. They need 2 armored divisions by late spring, or the Russians may start to overwhelm them with manpower. So I think we've got to stop, you know, metering out support They need deep strike artillery and rockets. They need tanks. They need lethal drones. They need better air defense, and it needs to come quick.
Admiral, do you agree?
I agree, and I'm going to add one thing to the shopping list, and you've heard me say it before, Joe. I think we should be providing them frontline capable tactical aircraft. MiG-29s at a minimum, which they already know how to fly. Poland has indicated a willingness to do this. And I would add F-16s. Some say, ooh, it'll take a long time to train him to fly that F-16. Look, Joe, we're not setting out to train you to fly an F-16. We are training combat experienced pilots who have been flying those MiGs. I think they can learn to fly an F-16 pretty damn quickly, particularly when they know they'll get it up in the air and be defending their families. So I would add to General McCaffrey's excellent list tactical aircraft.
I want to ask both of you, if you could, to do your best to put in historical perspective what Joe Biden, what his national security team, what the NATO alliance has done over the past year. You know, we look back to 47 through 49 and see what Harry Truman did, which really wasn't appreciated at the time. Are we going to look back at this past year and see a major shift in not just U.S. capabilities and NATO capabilities, but also possibly how the president's leadership and NATO's leadership led to a decline of Russia that may not be reversible for quite some time? And General McCaffrey, I'll start with you.
Well, you know, I think we ought to recognize that the Biden administration, I've been critical of them in some aspects, but foreign policy, defense policy, particularly the war in Ukraine, dealing with Taiwan, dealing with, for that matter, dealing with the Middle East, they've been sober-minded, careful. They're experienced. Secretary Blinken has done this his entire life. He understands international diplomacy. Lloyd Austin knows every nook and cranny of the global defense challenges. So they've done a really excellent job. But, Joe, I would assert the real deciding factor in the outcome in Europe of our security concerns will be decided in the U.S. Congress. Can Biden keep a bipartisan focus on supporting Ukraine, on supporting a strong armed forces, on supporting diplomacy, or will the remnants of the MAGA crowd drag us back to an America first and walk away from our allies? That's the question I'm worried about, not what he's done lately, but where's this going, and particularly beyond 2024.
And Admiral, let me ask you about the Biden administration and the miscalculation of Vladimir Putin and others. When I heard General McCaffrey talk about some of the things, saying that he disagreed with some of the things the Biden administration had done, I would guess that we would all likely agree that Afghanistan could have been handled better. But as I said at the time, anybody that's paid attention to Biden since 2009 would know that was coming. And I'm wondering whether Vladimir Putin miscalculated based on a decision that Biden made that was based solely on his contempt, let's just admit it, his contempt for leadership in Afghanistan since 2001.
Putin has miscalculated in too many ways to count, but I would put at the top of the list his underestimation of President Biden. And you asked about the historical piece of this. You know, we've seen this movie before just under a century ago, and it would be the 1930s, when we did have a crowd of isolationists in the United States who tried to pull us back from the League of Nations, pulled us out of Europe, built huge tariffs and trade barriers. How'd that work out? Well, we cracked the global economy, and you can drop a plumb line to the Second World War. And the echoes I see is a Biden administration that is trying, and I think succeeding, at getting ahead of that kind of isolationism, making the case for engagement, And I think they will ultimately succeed in this vastly important mission in Ukraine.
All right, retired four-star Army General Barry McCaffrey and retired four-star Navy Admiral James Stavridis, thank you so much. We greatly appreciate it.